Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. So, housing is in the news. New York City is expensive. Our mayor, our city council, our governor, everyone is talking about it. We want to talk about it, but we have a spin on this housing issue. We are not here just to talk about affordable housing, but before we get there, let me set the stage for this conversation. Many are struggling, and the people who serve us and the people who serve New York City continue to report that they cannot afford to live here. Now, there are those that don't believe that statement. I'm often around people that say, well, that can't be true, that, there's so much, people just want more for less, or they want something for nothing. We are here to tell you that that's not true. Middle and low-income New Yorkers who are forced to live in the city are often paying more than they can afford. So let me give you some data here to ground us. In 2002, the Douglas Elliman Market Report noted that between 2021 and 2022, the median rental in Manhattan increased by 32% to a rent of $3,925 a month. Now, what does that mean when the median rental in New York City rents for just under $4,000? Well, it means that in order to apply for a city apartment, a renter would need to earn $150,000 a year. Because to apply and qualify for an apartment, a renter, and that includes all the adults in that household, they have to show that they meet the 40 times rent rule that landlords apply. Never heard of the 40 times rent rule in New York City? Let me explain it. It means that the guideline says that when landlords look at an application, they want you to have 40 times the rental in your annual salary or the household's income. So unless you meet that threshold of earning 40 times more than your monthly income, you will not qualify for a median rental in New York City. Now, where do most New Yorkers fall on the income scale? Well, the median household in New York City falls somewhere between $67,000 and $73,000. Let me say that again. The median household in New York City reports an income that ranges between $67,000 and $73,000. Most New Yorkers don't even get close to the $150,000 annual income required to qualify for a median market rate rental. Well, let's also talk about New York City housing. We have 350,000 residents who live in New York City housing, also called NYCHA or New York City Public Housing. They have been complaining of poor quality housing, disrepair, apartments that lack heat, apartments that lack air conditioners, and unresponsive management. That's nothing new. You can Google that any day, and those complaints are there. Our shelters are overcrowded. Today's New York Times reports that we have about 77,000 people in our shelters. And in 2022, the typical shelter resident stayed in our shelters for over 500 days before they moved out to something that was better than a shelter. And in some cases, just better than a shelter. And finally, no conversation on housing can be complete without us speaking about the ongoing damage caused by intentional racial segregation. Because we did not get here by accident. Mm-hmm. We did not get here by accident. We often point to the Jim Crow segregation laws of the South from the 1890s to the early 1900s. But we forget that here on the East Coast, in New York, Black families were intentionally segregated over 100 years ago. And they were segregated through written and unwritten rules that governed public accommodation and housing. Many of you know this. And later, when our city's most famous urban planner, Robert Moses, developed his blueprint for housing, parks, playgrounds, highways, and bridges, his primary consideration that he factored into his formula was ethnic composition. And as a result, a dozen of our neighborhoods that were already segregated racially by written and unwritten law became permanently racially segregated. And those communities to this day are widely recognized for poor quality, dense housing, lack of public spaces, no safe parks or few, poor infrastructure, public safety concerns, poor transportation options, and in many cases, failing schools. So many of the young children that Children's Village serves comes from these communities and these schools. It is time to do something different. Our people don't need affordable housing. They need housing that is beautiful. They deserve housing that is safe. They deserve access, housing in neighborhoods where there's access to amenities and good public transportation. They deserve apartments that you and I would be willing to live in. Nothing less, nothing less. At Children's Village, and I know this is true at Cloth too, we often say that where your children go to school and where you live determines the entire trajectory of your life, your family's life. Where you live and where your children go to school, that determines everything. Joining me today are four amazing leaders and experts on this topic. They're not commentators, so this is what's cool about this panel. There are tons of talking heads out there. These are not them. These are people with lived experience as risk takers, getting things done, not just talking about it, because talk is cheap. It's when you take the risk of doing things that you learn that you may have done it wrong, learn that the public support you thought you had doesn't exist, and that even the political support doesn't exist because no one wants to back you when you try to do the right thing. But taking risk is what gets us to that future that we want to be. So let me introduce each one and we'll get right into the panel. The first is my friend Angel. Angel, can you come back on camera if possible? If not, I'm just going to introduce you. Angel Villamel lives in Harlem. He's a young man with lived experience, being homeless and moving from homelessness to beauty and to being a dad. So congratulations, Angel. We'll come back to you in a minute. We have Councilwoman Gale Brewer, a friend, a social worker, once was at Inwood House, which is part of Children's Village, helped us with Harlem, Home for Harlem Dowling, helped us with the Eliza, an advocate, someone that shares our common values for a greater New York. Welcome, Councilwoman, and thank you for being here. Yvonne Sennett, my friend, our co-developer in Inwood, where together we are building the Inwood Public Library, also known as the Eliza, and we will bring deeply affordable, beautiful apartments on market for the first time in Manhattan. Yvonne is a rock star, and I'll just leave you with that. And then finally, Mark Reed, the last but not the least. Mark is a housing developer, a philanthropist, a thought leader. Anyone that knows Mark will describe him as an all-round good guy. So here's my introduction to Mark. When we wanted to build a home for Harlem Dowling, to make sure the city keeps a promise that they made the Colored Orphan Asylum that was located at 44th and 5th Avenue and burnt down to the ground in 1863. And in 1864, the city made a promise to rebuild that building. But in 1912, 2012, it still had not been built. And we wanted to build it in honor of the asylum and in honor of Harlem Dowling and the great legacy that organization has to our city and our country. Mark stepped up and helped us make a very unique project possible. And not just possible in terms of what we built there, which is beautiful, gorgeous, right there on Adam Clayton, but also made it financially viable, which I think is the key to this conversation. We need things that are financially viable. So, Mark, thank you for joining us. Let's start with Councilwoman Brewer. Councilwoman, what is your vision for housing? I've heard you speak about so many things, including housing. Take a minute and tell us, what is your vision for housing for New York?
Well, thank you. I guess if I had my overall vision and wish, I would say every single development should be what you do, which is the public and the private. If it can't be just done by the nonprofit sector, I would love to see a combination, at least the nonprofit sector be part of any housing built. Let that be as it may, because I don't always get my wish. But I want to just give you a sense of quickly what is going on in terms of the budget, because that's what we're in the midst of now. And then I can be more specific really quickly. So the governor said that she wants to build 800,000 new homes over 10 years. That's part of this $25 billion 5-year program that she has. That's, of course, statewide. So it includes the suburbs as well as the city. And the mayor says that as part of his 10-year plan, he's putting in $18.6 billion, and he wants to do 15,000 every single year. I think there are 18,000 starts this year. So that sounds like big money, you know, oh, we're going to be able to build housing, but it's not so easy, because obviously you talked about NYCHA, which is a separate discussion. The mayor put in some money, the governor did not. We're talking about preservation, because as we're talking about building housing, we don't want to lose the housing that we already have. So we need tenant attorneys. We need to make sure that they're healthy apartments in terms of no pests and no mold. We have to make sure that the people have the funding, if they don't, to be able to pay the rent so they don't end up homeless. So all of that preservation is as important. Then you have to talk about new housing, which you are the experts at. But again, do you have the funding? And let me just be clear. I'm concerned in terms of wishes that there are enough people at HPD or DHCR or HDF or HDC that when you build this housing, there is somebody there to help you do so. I'm worried now that as we speak, there's not enough staffing. That seems like a very minutia issue. But in terms of vision, we need more people at these agencies to make these capital dollars flow. Then, of course, there's the issue of just homelessness. And you've got all these different, if I could have my wishes, we want more vouchers because that helps people stay, but also get housing. And they have to be enough for the apartment to be worth it for the owner. And there are different kinds of vouchers. The shelter allowance has to be dealt with. You have to deal with the AMI, which I know you talked about. Because, you know, we're based on a federal system and it doesn't always make sense. I want to just mention home ownership. If you have a vision and you have wishes, you want more home ownership, because, and we could talk more about that if you wish. And then, of course, you just, you know, my vision, big vision also would be Mitchell Llamas were the best program ever built in the city of New York or the state. And at least in my district, many of them were bought out, co-ops and rentals. So the issue is, what can we come up with on the state level, Mitchell Llama? And the same thing with single room occupancy. You can renovate them now, but you can't build a new one under the law. So my vision would be to have more SROs that are appropriately built and more Mitchell Llamas. And also, you know, in Manhattan, because you mentioned about the issue of racial non-integration, segregation. I'm so frustrated in the borough of Manhattan, which I know best. Thank goodness you've been able to do some housing, and certainly Beth's been able to do it. The problem is every time I bring up, we have the best schools, we have transportation, we're near the jobs. Please let us have more affordable housing and not just the 25% that MIH, we can talk about all these acronyms if you want. Basically, it means that in a new building where there is a change in the zoning, the owner gets to put in market rate and only, my opinion, 25% would be affordable. The reason I'm concerned is that the city tells me we will not put in any Section 8. We will not put in any ability to support with our dollars because the owners are doing it. Well, that's a mistake, in my opinion. I know Bronx is cheaper, Brooklyn may be cheaper, but here you have the schools, you have the transportation, you have the jobs. Why in the world can't we make this neighborhood more integrated, as you suggested, when you have neighbors and schoolmates helps you get ahead in the future? So frustrating beyond belief on that front. And then, of course, there's Housing Connect, which is a great program to get into this housing, but it's also very challenging and doesn't include those who are not citizens of the United States. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I've tried to list in a very, not the best organized way, but all of the different acronyms and alphabet soup, so to speak, that make up affordable housing.
Thank you, Councilwoman. You always kind of help set the stage. We'll come back to some of that. We believe in integration, and we know it can be done, and we proved it can be done, and we are all better for it, right? When we live amongst each other, we are all better for it. Let me go to Angel. Angel, I know you've got a busy day. Take 2 minutes. Could you tell us your story and tell us why? Well, tell us what your vision for housing is for your child. I know he just born, but soon enough. What's your vision for housing? And tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
All right. So my senior year at high school was 2020 when COVID actually struck. So I was working, being essential, and I was just bouncing from home to home. I had no real stability, and it was confusing because I was actually paying everywhere I went. I paid rent in a sense. I try to contribute. I try to contribute to wherever I was residing at. So then I just had to brainstorm and actually invest all that time into myself, which was getting in an apartment and using the resources that are eligible to me. So I got my apartment, and I've been living here for 2 years. Going just past February 4th, I've been living here for 2 years, and having my own space is really essential. Like, it allowed me to be comfortable. I have peace of mind. I'm really a lot more calm, and living. I learned a lot. I cook, I clean. I just do a lot of essential things that I just was doing on my own. So now I'm just doing it in the vicinity of my home, and getting an apartment, it helped me get back into trade school and learn things that I thought I would have never learned. So I took my NTA test in November, and I passed. If it wasn't for enrolling into trade school, I would have never even got the waiver paid for, the fee waiver paid for. It's a beauty just knowing that I have resources and people to rely on and to look for help.
Thank you, Angel. So you live at the corner of Adam Clayton Powell and 126th. You have access to all the trains, including the Metro North, right? You've got a supermarket in front of you. You've got a pharmacy around the corner. And don't forget the Starbucks and occasionally the Red Rooster, right? I mean, you got good food, you got pharmacy, you got coffee, you got transportation. You feel safer. You went to trade school. You passed your MTA exam. Man, why can't we do this for everyone your age? We probably should. So let me go to Yvonne. Yvonne, we do the same work. What's your vision? And I know your vision, but tell the audience. We need to know.
So I have this, wouldn't it be nice kind of bundle, right? Wouldn't it be nice if no one is paying more than 30% of their annual income for rent? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if families could stay within the communities that they were born and grow in and help to maintain the balance in their communities? Wouldn't it be nice if working people had the opportunity to live in New York City? Right now, the middle class is actually being kind of pushed out of the city, right? Wouldn't it be nice if subsidies were funded at an adequate level and made more available? Can we see what the mix in affordable housing and across the boroughs of lower incomes and middle incomes, and make more of an equitable community in terms of balancing the economics? Wouldn't it be nice if the AMIs were actually set at a level commensurate with communities, right? So that those folks within those communities actually had an opportunity to get into the housing market. Wouldn't it be great if tenants' rights were protected at the level that they should be, that legal lawyers and so forth were made available to them, and that we really protected them, and that preservation, back to the councilwoman, that we were doing preservation, that was coupled with building new buildings. We have several HDFCs across the city that have struggled and are still struggling. They were the first to develop home ownership opportunities, but they have struggled, and they have struggled because a lot of the investment has not been made in the people to actually grow them, to understand how to operate the properties, how to look at their financial structure, how to manage the physical upkeep of the buildings. So that preservation piece is used both in home ownership, in particular with the HDFCs, but also in rental units as well, in terms of organizing tenants and building tenants association. Wouldn't it be nice if the HPD was, as the councilwoman said, was really adequately staffed, so that the pipeline that they have is being addressed and being moved in a way that lessens the cost of construction. The longer buildings are kept in the pipelines, the more expensive the projects become. The more burden is placed on not-for-profit developers and or private developers to actually make a project work. And then can we make some investment in people? And when I say that, I'm talking about looking at developments very similar to what you and I are doing, not just the bricks and mortar, but how do we invest in the people? How do we provide the types of services that they need to actually move through the issues that long time have been causing them not to get adequate jobs, not to be able to get right education? So I think all of this has led into the disparities and the imbalance in terms of communities across our city, and it's going to continue doing that if some of these things aren't addressed. So my vision is to see all of this put in place, right?
Yep. Well, thank you. We're going to come right back to you in a few minutes. Mark, over to you. You see housing from a very different level. You look at financing, you look at model development, you look at the partnerships. What's your vision for what housing can be now that we finally have at least more people talking about it?
Yeah,
not just in New York City.
I think that housing especially, but all of our, the way we live together relies on trust among all people in a neighborhood, all people in a city. And, we read a lot about the lack of trust, when trust is broken, that's what makes headlines and that's what people grumble about. But most people continue to live their lives in a way that relies on the notion of trusting their fellow citizens, trusting the people around them to do the right thing and to build in a positive way. And so that's the essence of what gives me the conviction that we have the capacity to do so much more and build so much more that enhances life for all New Yorkers. And in particular, I think about the opportunity to get private people in New York City who are of means to commit to and invest in neighborhoods for everyone, and to provide the tools and the opportunity for people who have less to make the most of their lives. Housing is the building block of that, right? If a family, if a person is in a stable place where they feel safe, it benefits every other aspect of their life, their education, their interpersonal dynamics, their interfamily dynamics. And so building more housing is so obviously needed, as you said, Jeremy, in your opening. And I think that the problem with that is we have a deep lack of trust in how we build housing in this city. There's rich versus poor. There's government versus private. There's pro-development versus not in my backyard. And to me, as far as the vision for how to break through that, relies on organizations like yours and Yvonne's. Nonprofit organizations that are deeply committed and have roots in the communities where they're working and can help to overcome some of the lack of trust that there is among all these parties in executing a plan. And I believe that it is with strong nonprofit organizations that we're going to be able to build housing more efficiently. We're going to be able to move people who are waiting for housing into those units more efficiently. If we can increase the trust and rely on organizations like your own that have had, decades and decades of successful operations and are places that attract individuals who want to do this work, who are deeply personally committed to this work, and over, build this culture of improving the community for all. And I really believe that people of means share that vision, and they are willing to put their money where their mouth is, and they want to see this housing get built. And so I think there is an opportunity for people of means to invest in building communities that is in accordance with the vision that you and Yvonne have outlined. And if we can leverage that opportunity, we can, I think, avoid getting tangled up in bureaucracy and in fighting in those community boards where every word gets thrown out at every person. So that is that's the vision that I continue to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, great start off. Let me just recap before we get into the next questions. Councilwoman Brewer has lifted up the need for the public-private partnership and all the back office work that needs to happen to make that a reality. Mark talks about the need to build trust in our communities so that NIMBYism and the lack of information doesn't rule the day, rather than those that we come together as New Yorkers to say that when we live together, we are all better together. And Yvonne has reminded us that there are some key changes that could be made that could make housing more equitable. And some of them are policy issues, but we can get in there, we can do it. I think if we have the will, we can get it done. And most important, Angel reminds us that his life is dramatically better. He was couch surfing, but paying rent, right? Actually, this is important, folks. We always think of our young people who are couch surfing. We have thousands of them couch surfing in New York City who are at risk, who are trading a lot of their safety for a place to sleep. In Angel's case, he was actually paying while he was couch surfing. And then he gets an apartment on the 9th. Are you on the 9th floor or the 10th floor now, Angel?
The 10th.
On the 10th, with these floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking New York City. He goes to school, he gets passes an exam, stays in school, is now a dad, feels safe. It's not all perfect, but Angel is on a whole different trajectory. Let's go to a question, and I'm going to use the ELIZA, which is the Inwood Public Library project up in the Inwood neighborhood, as the centerpiece for this conversation. Yvonne, take 1 minute. Tell us, what is the ELIZA?
You know,
And
it's
I
so
think someone will probably put a link up or a picture in the chat too, but tell us the vision of ELIZA.
So the ELIZA, actually, it was in response to an RFP proposal that was put out by HPD. And its intent was to redevelop the library. The existing library was there, but to add some other dimensions to it. The ELIZA is supported by and funded through the ELA program, which is the extremely low financial program or product that HPD has, and it's coupled with 9% tax credits in terms of its funding. It has been a wonderful project in terms of the team, and that's one thing we always need to understand. The team that makes these development is essential. If they are not mission-aligned and really understand how to function and understand the different pieces, the project can fall apart. So very happy to be partnered with Children's Village, Ranger Properties, Housing Workshop, and Cloth, and that is the dynamics that makes up the team. The ELIZA consists of a number of components. There's a 20,926 square foot New York Public Library, 9,000 square foot space for an ACTS Center, which is a community performing center, which includes a teaching kitchen. We also have 6,000 square foot of universal pre-K classrooms, 2,000 square foot STEM center. Above all of this, we have 174 units of deeply, deeply affordable housing. The income ranges go from 18,000 a year up to 118, very deeply and adequately suitable for this community. There are other amenities that are involved in the program. We have laundry rooms, we have bike room, we have a lounge area, we have a garden, rooftop garden. It is a place where any one of us on the screen would want to live, wish to live, and could enjoy. And I think this is the type of projects we need to look at as we look across the city in the development of projects, because services are on site, as well as the ability to make people feel very proud of where they are. So it's an exciting project. We are slated to have our TCO in October of this year, and to, by 2024, actually have it tenanted and in full use of the programming and so forth in all of the other spaces.
Thank you, Yvonne. I should also mention that there's this comment about having the right partners, right? So every time Yvonne, Children's Village, Cloth, and Housing Workshop meets together, we are actually not value engineering downward anymore. We're like, what can we do more? What can we do more? We just upgraded the kitchen counters. We replaced a couple pieces of equipment in the lounge with Peloton bikes. I mean, those are decisions that we're making every day now as we're getting closer to TCO, paint colors. So when you have the right partner, you can actually think about the future. Councilwoman Brewer, you played a big role in helping the ELIZA become a possibility, but also you fought some of the battles around rezoning. They were not always easy, they were complicated. What were the things you learned in going through that process that you would like us to remember?
Well, there was a lot of inward rezoning, that is for sure. And I've done East Midtown, South Street Seaport, Inwood, East Harlem, many others, Soho. That wasn't fun. But I would say that I think also Robin Hood had a role, Robin Hood Foundation in the Eliza. And that's a big, in other words, replicating what you experienced there would be fantastic. I think that, I mean, there were so many problems with Eliza in terms of not the end result, but the people wanted a bigger library. So that took many, many meetings and, you know, community boards. You just have to go through it. You have to know there are going to be questions and you have to answer them. And that's what you did. And that's why it's such a great project. But yes, would we like other Elizas in other parts of the city? Absolutely, where you have a community-based entity on the ground floor and then deeply affordable housing above. But I think you probably do need a Robin Hood or something similar to be able to do that. It doesn't happen just with the private sector and the city and state money and federal money. So yes, I would love it. The experience I've had in all of these, to be honest with you, is the more affordable the building is, the more support there is from the neighborhood. But when you have sometimes just a 25%, you're going to get pushback. In addition, you want local community-based organizations as you have with the Eliza. So if you bring in, to be honest with you, I can talk about other parts of Manhattan, you know, somebody from another borough or another county outside of the city, and you say, this is a great organization, but nobody knows them, you're going to get pushback, particularly when it's not 100% affordable, or they're working on supportive housing with a challenging population. So I think the answer to your question is we need many more Elizas, exactly the model. We need foundations to put money in addition to the tax credits that Yvonne talked about. And you need, I mean, you know, we need all of those kinds of community-based entities, because whether it's a library, community center, health center, et cetera, they're all desperately needed in the neighborhood. So I guess what I can say is we just need more Elizas, but they don't come so easily, unfortunately.
Wasn't easy at all, Councilwoman. As we describe it, it was 4 years and 5 lawsuits. But we're almost there now, and it's beautiful, and just love it. Thank you for your vision. Mark, step away for a second from your vision and help us understand the financing. I know that could be like a 10-hour session, but what do you want us to know about successful financing? You know, the councilwoman mentioned, you know, having that $5 million from Robin Hood for the public library portion really played a big part in making that work. You know, $5 million for our people is nothing, right? I mean, our people deserve $5 billion for all they've gone through and all that they do. So it's not even the number, but what does it take? When you look at a model, what are you looking for, and what excites you when you see the right model?
Yeah, with housing, I think it's helpful to think in phases. You know, you sort of have pre-development, construction, and then permanent service, and those are different experiences that need different kinds of money. And if your permanent result is going to be something that is heavily subsidized, like a library, right? None of us swipe our MetroCard when we go into the library, but somebody's funding that operation, and so you need a lot of extra money to have that work. If you have something on the ground floor that is a rent-paying tenant, even if it's a related entity like Children's Village on 127th and Adam Clayton Powell, that can make a project more viable and self-sustainable. But at the beginning, in pre-development, you need entrepreneurial capital that can get something done, and you don't need to spend you don't need to waste the time of the project managers jumping through a lot of hoops, because they've got so much other work to do and so many other decisions to make. And so that's where I think there's a nice match with low cost, fast moving pre-development loans that can get a project off the ground, that can give Yvonne enough money to hire a project manager or pay an architect to do several different studies of different concepts, but which has an eventual source of repayment in construction financing or from permanent financing. That's where I spent the bulk of my time. What Yvonne and I have worked on as a separate idea is providing a financial backstop to smaller organizations. I was just having a dialogue with someone at a huge financial institution yesterday. He's very knowledgeable about affordable housing. And he was asking basically, I don't understand, and what I'm talking about, well, he said, I don't understand why an organization that qualifies for low-income housing tax credits would need a financial backstop. And the point is, we have this thing out there, the low-income housing tax credit, which right now is our best tool for building affordable housing. But it's funded by corporations and they're risk averse. They don't want to lose money. And so you can get an award from the city that says you qualify for low-income housing tax credits, but the corporations who will fund that are not going to take the risk on a small organization. And the small organizations tend to be the ones that are neighborhood-based, that are led by people of color, that know their neighborhoods and are sitting there meeting people face to face. And so they need capacity to execute their plans.
Exactly.
So my dream and my hope for the next phase is to raise money from investors to provide financial backstop to organizations like Cloth. When Cloth says, you know, we've been walking by this deserted building for the last 15 years. We want to take it and make it into affordable housing. They need the tools to do that. And that's what this backstop concept is. So that's what's next.
Love it. Count us in on that backstop idea. Yvonne, were you trying to get a word in there?
No, I was just agreeing with Mark. You know, part of the issues that we have with the development of housing is in fact the pipeline that gets established at HPD. And the longer those projects sit in the pipeline, the more expensive those deals become, right? Because the prices are changing. And by the time you have created that initial pro forma, by the time they're ready to actually move the program along, you have tripled that budget. And then there's no place to find the funding to actually make it happen. So the project stalls and it stalls and it stalls, and it impacts the number of affordable units you prepare in any, or you provide in any given time. But after a while, the not-for-profit can't sustain that. It cannot sustain the constant wait and the time for that. So it becomes problematic. So if we don't have a Mark, or we don't have someone that understands that and is willing to work with you on the pre-development side, but also understanding that that pre-development may need to be extended, the term of that, just based on the city's production line, needs to be extended and not extended at a rate of interest that puts you out of business, then that's problematic. And that's where that understanding, that dynamics, that synergy between public and private needs to be able to be made and understood.
Agreed. We're getting into the final 15 minutes of our panel. If you have questions for our panelists, please put it into the chat. Before we go to the final round here, I have a question for Angel. Angel, we didn't prepare for this. I'm just going to throw it out there for you. So, you know, one of the things I hear from young people, I just heard it this week, that are couch surfing, that are just getting pushed from one place to the other. And sometimes they leave because they say, what you're asking of me, I won't give. You know, I don't want to have sex with you just to have a bedroom. I don't want to do drugs with you. I'm going to walk out. you found housing, you have a family, but did you meet a lot of other young people when you were couch surfing who were in a similar circumstances as you? And what happened to them? Do you know?
So a lot of the times I was couch surfing, I was staying with family members. I do know individuals who are currently still couch surfing. And what I tell them is you can't expect something from someone when we all have a job to do. Like, it costs to live. Regardless of how you put it, we have to eat every day. We have to shower every day. Something has to give. You have to dedicate your time and your effort towards the good, not the bad, not the things that's wasting your time and wasting your energy. Make sure that you're at the end of the day, you're good. And your sanity is what should be upheld.
And for you, having housing is what held your sanity together, right?
Waking up every day and just breathing, just being happy of where I'm at. It's just, you always got to be grateful. This is just a stepping stone. You know, it's for one of the first steps of many. You know, I'm only 21. I have a long life to live, and I hope to just live it to the fullest.
Angel, I want you to know that that's how we feel when we wake up. Most of us here at this workshop today, we love it. You know, we wake up, we feel safe, we go to sleep, we feel safe. And that's exactly what you deserve, and every other young person. And I forgot, you're only 21. You got a long way to go. So hopefully you'll be on these panels many more times, and one day you'll be a co-developer. So let's get to a final round of questions here. I want to talk a little bit more about the housing pipeline, because I think our audience needs to know what it means. It takes years to put a good project together. It takes years to put a good project together. Councilwoman Brewer, from your vast experience in Manhattan and in the city of New York, have you seen mistakes that could have been avoided, that developers could have planned a little better or prepared a little better that would have expedited that pipeline? Or if you don't want to answer that, don't feel you have to. And you don't need to name anyone.
Well, just to give you I believe, and others may have other numbers, but it's over 500,000 units that are needed right now in terms of affordable and non-affordable, just plain people coming to the city of New York. So, and if you talk about the mayor wanting, I thought I said around 15,000 a year, and, you know, some from from the state, we're not even close. So we do need to figure out this pipeline. It's, as you have mentioned, and so has Yvonne and Mark, it's the most important issue right now. And, you know, so problem is the pipeline. Yes, I've seen lots of mistakes. I think the time that it takes to get a project off the ground is the problem. And to be honest with you, I was around before the pandemic doing this, and now after the pandemic, and it's worse. Yeah. And of course, the housing situation is worse, cost and numbers. So yes, the pipeline somebody has to figure out how to improve the pipeline. The second issue is, you have to have the right kind of funding. So if we want to do, you got to keep, at the same time, to be honest with this pipeline, not only are you building, but you have to preserve. People forget about, you did, but people forget about the preservation. Before the pandemic, we lost 150,000 rent stabilized apartments in a few years, 150,000. So that's where, and now apparently we have 62,000 or some number like that of rent stabilized units that are being warehoused. So there's a lot of pieces to this pipeline. It's building, and then of course on the pipeline, are you building supportive? Are you building affordable? What's the mixture? So it's all, there's so many different pieces, but it all comes down to the pipeline and how slow it is. Yeah. When you're doing the rezonings, which sometimes the building is there ready, or the plot of land is there. So it's not like you have to go through the process. Do it. People complain about the community boards. I happen to like the community boards. I was on one, I appointed them. Mark had to deal with them. Too bad, Mark, that's life, But they, you do need to have input from the community. But guess what? If you have a local nonprofit, if you have, like you said, trust, then it goes faster. But if you have impediments that, I can list, then it's not going to go fast. So in a sense, figure out, in addition to the pre-development issues that you articulately mentioned, think about the pre-development in terms of the community input. So right. There's so many, the pipeline has many strings or aspects to it that you rightly brought up, but it does come down to all different kinds of pipelines that have to be addressed early on. And I'm also, for these big rezonings, East Harlem did a really good job under Melissa and Mark Brewer, I have to tell you, because they had a report. So they spent 2 years pre-planning. The worst thing you do, and I love Adonis Rodriguez, but it was, last minute Adonis. I tell them this all the time. And so it made it harder and inward. Then you got lawsuits all over the place.
Yeah.
So if you do the pre-planning for 2 years, then you have, buy-in from the community that says, okay, we might not all agree, but we're at least, we have a plan that we can more or less agree on.
Makes total sense. Mark, anything to contribute to this this question? Have you seen big mistakes that can be avoided or should be avoided?
I mean, I could go on and on. I think that you have to vet your partners. You have to make sure your partners are going to be around for the long haul. That's your nonprofit partners. That's your your community members, your general contractors, and that's really the work of developers, whether they're for-profits or nonprofits. You have to do your due diligence and understand that you're in a long-term commitment.
Good point. We've got a few minutes. Let's jump into some questions. A lot of talk about converting empty office space to apartments. Open to all of you. Any thoughts about this? My sense is we need state regulatory change for New York City, and it's also going to take time, but is there any way to make this work faster? It makes sense to me. Yvonne, Gale?
I think one hard part with the office markets in New York City are so different, right? The products are different. You have amazing brand new high rises, and you have 80-year-old Art Deco buildings, with dated systems. Getting the older buildings, which don't really have much hope, to get them to do a transaction is hard, because the owners often have owned them for a long time. They don't want to sell and take a big loss, and so they're just hanging on, and they can fight bankruptcy off for a long time. I think owners of small, you have to be targeted. So think about neighborhoods and types of buildings that you want, and create incentives for those owners to give up to a new idea, a new transaction, which would be converting to residential. And I think it was done well in Lower Manhattan after 9/11.
Yeah, I think that's a resource that's open to us that really needs very deep consideration. I guess the angst that I have is that there's so much happening now in terms of what we have to fix with the existing systems that it's going to impact our ability to move into a different kind of market, right? I mean, we have to streamline the process right now for development, right? We have to make sure that our city agencies are adequately sourced in terms of labor, in terms of expertise, in terms of being able to move their pipeline. We have to look at the dynamics across the city in terms of, you need to, as much as we're favoring larger developers to go in there and look at bigger projects, you have to have a balance between looking at smaller projects too, because that really impacts the dynamics of a community. So you really have to look at that. Then we have issues around J51 that we need to really kind of hone in on and figure out, how do we make that easier to access, right? The article is good, but we would need to be able to look at that. And then we have to start thinking about targeting households that are below $50,000 if we're going to really, be able to do a mix between the poorer communities of color versus middle class versus all of that. We have to expand the home ownership, in terms of a lower income levels for the household. Right now, they're between 80% and 120% of AMI. We need to go down if we're going to talk about really preserving home ownership for communities of color and people of color. And then we have to support our local non-for-profits and our MWBEs at the rate that they should be. They should be supported. So we got all those to fix it in what we have now as our market. And here we are thinking about jumping out into a different market. So
yeah,
sorry.
Jeremy, I think it's possible easier to convert some of the hotels, and that has been discussed. Again, are they available? Where are they? What about the union? And then the second issue with conversion, and you know more than I, but a lot of these, as you say, B and C buildings, not the fancy commercials, they have, as they do, they have very few windows on the outside. So you have to have certain kinds of windows and ways of making an apartment that may not fit. So therefore, it costs more. Mm-hmm. And therefore, is it going to be affordable? And if the city's not going to give me my subsidy for Manhattan, then how are we going to make this affordable? So I would just caution people, at least in the conversions, all of these issues go into play.
Gale, a question from Councilwoman Brewer.
Gale, I prefer Gale. Go ahead.
A friend of yours and mine, Mr. David Schwartz, the former chairman of the Working Families Party. His question, is there anything we can do to change city law to expedite some of what we've discussed? Is there room here, or have we explored that and ruled out the need for any more change?
Well, I do think that there has to be people, as Yvonne stated, at the agencies. I don't know if it's a law. I've had 2 hearings on this topic. Let's see if the mayor can pull this off. They need people. It's just, I don't think it's a legal issue, but it is definitely an issue of personnel that is knowledgeable. At this point, I think that's what it is. If you have the money and you don't have the personnel, it's going to tie up the pipeline.
Well, we are at time. Thank you all. Just remind you that the next generation of housing is possible. Where we live and where our children go to school is a game changer. That's a game changer. There's no reason for us to embrace the past history of discrimination and isolation and rejection and pass that on to our children and our future generations. It's time for us to do something different. And Angel, you were the most important voice here today, brother. Thank you. And Mark put it in chat. He said, we want you for president. Maybe you can start by being the president of CV, and then we'll graduate you from there. Thank you, Gale. Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, Mark. You guys are incredible. We love you. We are building in New York City. We want to build in Westchester. This is not just a New York City problem, right? All of us need to come together. Many of us in Westchester work in New York City. We have to own the vision of living together and enjoying each other's company. And that's what we are working toward. Thank you for your time.
Jeremy, for hosting.
Thank you.